The grand clock in the Ravenwood mansion struck noon, its chime echoing through the marble halls like a solemn announcement of fate. The air was heavy with the weight of tradition and obligation, a suffocating reminder of the day's significance. On the top floor, in an opulent dressing room adorned with gilded mirrors and crystal chandeliers, Clara Ravenwood stood silently before a full-length mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, a vision of elegance and perfection. The wedding gown, custom-made by a world-renowned designer, clung to her slender frame, its intricate lace and shimmering pearls catching the soft golden light. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, with delicate tendrils framing her face, and her makeup was flawless, accentuating her natural beauty. But Clara's eyes, once bright with dreams and curiosity, were now shadowed with sadness and quiet defiance. She felt like a doll, dressed and displayed for a purpose she had no say in. Her father, Edward Ravenwood, had made it clear the night before, "This marriage is the only way to save the company, Clara. Without it, everything your mother and I built will crumble." Clara's heart ached at the mention of her late mother, Margaret Ravenwood, a woman of strength and integrity who had always fought for what was right. But Margaret was gone, taken in a mysterious car accident 3 years ago, leaving Clara to shoulder the weight of the family's legacy. "I am not a pawn to be traded," Clara had told her father, her voice trembling with both fear and resolve, but Edward's cold, distant gaze had said it all. There was no room for her protests. As the clock ticked closer to the ceremony, Clara knew she had to act. She wasn't going to let her life be decided for her, not like this. The sprawling gardens of the Ravenwood estate were bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, the air thick with the scent of blooming roses. Clara's heart pounded as she slipped through the hidden door in her dressing room, her wedding gown rustling softly against the stone walls of the secret corridor. She clutched the hem of the dress tightly, her other hand gripping a small box containing her escape essentials: a pair of flat shoes, a burner phone, and a modest amount of cash. Her breaths came in shallow gasps as she emerged into the garden, her flats barely making a sound on the gravel paths. The towering hedges and carefully manicured flower beds offered some cover, but the estate's floodlights and patrolling guards made every step feel like a gamble. "Almost there," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. At the far end of the garden, a small gate hidden behind a wall of ivy promised freedom. But just as she reached the final pathway, the sound of footsteps shattered her fragile hope. "Search the area. She couldn't have gone far," a guard's voice barked, sending a wave of panic through her. Clara froze, her mind racing. She ducked behind a large rosebush, her heart hammering in her chest. The beam of a flashlight swept dangerously close to her hiding spot. "Just stay calm," she whispered, though her hands trembled as she adjusted the folds of her gown. But fate had other plans. As she shifted to sneak past the bush, her foot caught on a root, and the sudden movement drew the attention of a nearby guard. "Who's there?" a deep, commanding voice demanded. Clara turned, startled as the flashlight pinned her in place. Standing before her was a tall man in a security uniform, his sharp features illuminated by the beam of light. His name tag read Ethan Cross, and there was something about his piercing gaze that felt out of place for an ordinary guard. I, Clara stammered, her mind blank, as the sound of more footsteps grew louder. Desperation took over. Without thinking, she lunged forward, grabbing Ethan by the shoulders and pulling him down toward her. Before he could react, her lips pressed against his in a sudden, frantic kiss. The world seemed to freeze. Ethan's body tensed, his hands instinctively coming up to her shoulders. But he didn't push her away. Instead, his sharp eyes softened, quickly assessing the situation. The approaching guards stopped in their tracks, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "What's going on here?" one of them asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Ethan straightened, his expression calm and authoritative. "Nothing at all," he replied smoothly. "Just a nervous bride taking a moment to breathe before her big day." The other guard hesitated, his eyes narrowing as he glanced between them, but after a tense moment he nodded and moved on, signaling the others to follow. As soon as they were out of earshot, Clara pulled away, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know what else to do. Please, don't tell them." Ethan studied her intently, his gaze unreadable. After a moment he spoke, his voice low but firm. "Follow me. I know another way out." Clara blinked, surprised. "Are you serious?" "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't," he replied, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Without waiting for her response, Ethan turned and began leading her through the garden, his movements swift and deliberate. Clara hesitated for only a second before deciding to trust him. He guided her to a hidden path she had never noticed before, moving with an ease and familiarity that made her wonder just how well he knew the estate. They stopped at a small concealed gate covered in thick ivy. Ethan reached for a hidden lever, and the gate swung open, revealing a narrow escape route. "Thank you," Clara whispered, glancing over her shoulder nervously. "Don't thank me yet," Ethan replied, his tone serious. "Do you have a plan?" Clara hesitated, her voice faltering. "No, I just know I can't stay here." Ethan's gaze softened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "Fine, but first you'll need a safe place to lay low. Follow me." Clara barely had time to process his words before he started walking again, his steps confident and purposeful. She followed, her mind racing with questions. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that Ethan Cross wasn't just a security guard. He was the CEO of Cross Tech Innovations, one of the most powerful tech conglomerates in the world. And he wasn't at the Ravenwood estate by chance. Ethan had been working undercover, investigating Victor Harrington's shady dealings. But his meticulously planned mission had just been thrown into chaos by a desperate kiss from a runaway bride. "This girl," Ethan muttered under his breath as they disappeared into the night. He had no idea how tangled their fates were about to become. The faint glow of streetlights reflected off the wet pavement as Ethan's car sped through the quiet city streets. Clara sat in the passenger seat, her hands clutching the coat Ethan had handed her. The warmth of the fabric did little to calm the tension coursing through her veins. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To a safe house," Ethan replied, his tone calm but firm. His eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, his sharp features illuminated by the dim light of the dashboard. Clara glanced at him, her mind racing with questions. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? And why did he seem so out of place for a security guard? The car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath an unassuming building. Ethan led her up a narrow staircase to a modest apartment. The space was clean and functional, with minimal furniture and no personal touches. It felt more like a temporary hideout than a home. "Sit," Ethan said, gesturing to the small couch. Clara obeyed, her nerves still on edge. Ethan disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He handed one to her before sitting across from her, his posture relaxed but his gaze intense. "All right," he began, his voice steady. "I think it's time we had a proper conversation. Who are you running from, and why?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening around the mug. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "My father arranged for me to marry Victor Harrington. He said it was the only way to save our company. But Victor, he's not who he pretends to be. He's dangerous." Ethan's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Dangerous how?" Clara hesitated, her mind flashing back to the countless times she had seen Victor's cold, calculating smile. "He's ruthless. I've heard rumors about him destroying families, businesses, even lives. And I think he had something to do with my mother's death." Ethan leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Your mother?" Clara nodded, her voice breaking slightly. 3 years ago, my mother, Margaret Ravenwood, died in a car accident. But before she died, she told me she had uncovered something unusual in one of the company's deals. She said it was dangerous, but she didn't have time to explain. And then the accident happened. Ethan's jaw tightened, his mind working quickly. You think Victor was involved? I don't just think, Clara said, her voice firm despite the tears welling in her eyes. I know, but I don't have proof, and now my father is forcing me to marry him, as if that will fix everything. Ethan sat back, his gaze thoughtful. After a moment, he spoke. You're right to run. Victor Harrington isn't just a businessman. He's far more dangerous than you realize. Clara's eyes widened. How do you know that? Ethan hesitated, then sighed. Because I've been investigating him for months. He's been using his company as a front for illegal activities, money laundering, corporate sabotage, and worse. But the most alarming thing I've uncovered is his partnership with Dr. Angela Lynn. Clara frowned. Angela Lynn, the pharmaceutical tycoon? Ethan nodded. She's not just a scientist. She's a manipulator. Together, she and Victor are developing bioweapons disguised as medical research. They're creating artificial diseases and selling the cures at exorbitant prices. Worse, these bioweapons can be used to destabilize governments and economies. Clara stared at him, her mind reeling. That's monstrous. It is, Ethan agreed, his voice grim. And if Victor gains control of your family's company, he'll have access to the technology and resources he needs to complete their project. Claire's hands trembled as she set the mug down. We have to stop them. Ethan's gaze softened slightly. We will, but it won't be easy. Victor is powerful, and he has an entire network protecting him. If we're going to take him down, we need more than just determination. We need evidence. Clara straightened, a spark of resolve igniting in her chest. I can help. My mother taught me how to analyze financial records. If there's anything suspicious in the company's accounts, I'll find it. Ethan's lips quirked into a faint smile. Good, because I have something that might help. He stood and retrieved a small external hard drive from his bag. This contains data I've gathered on Victor's operations. It's incomplete, but it's a start. If you can help me piece it together, we might have a chance. Clara took the hard drive, her fingers brushing against his. I'll do whatever it takes. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. Then we're in this together. For the first time in years, Clara felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, the safe house was alive with quiet determination. Clara sat at the small dining table, her laptop open and her fingers flying across the keyboard. The hard drive Ethan had given her was plugged in, and rows of financial data filled the screen. Ethan stood nearby, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, his sharp eyes watching her work. He had been impressed by how quickly Clara had adapted to the situation. She wasn't just a sheltered heiress. She was intelligent, resourceful, and fiercely determined. This is it, Clara said, her voice breaking the silence. She turned the laptop toward Ethan, pointing to a series of transactions. These payments, large sums of money funneled through shell companies, are tied to Victor's offshore accounts. And here, she clicked on another file. This is a contract between Victor's company and Angela Lynn's pharmaceutical firm. It's disguised as a research partnership, but the terms are vague. Too vague. They're hiding something. Ethan leaned in, his brow furrowing as he studied the screen. Good work. This is exactly the kind of evidence we need to start building a case. But it's not enough. We need something concrete, proof of the bioweapons project. Clara nodded, her mind racing. If they're working on something that dangerous, they must have a lab, a facility where they're conducting the experiments. Ethan straightened, his expression thoughtful. I might know where to start. Victor owns a private estate outside the city. It's heavily guarded, and no one goes in or out without clearance. If they're hiding something, it's there. Clara's stomach tightened at the thought of returning to Victor's world, but she pushed the fear aside. Then we'll go there. Ethan raised an eyebrow. We? Yes, we, Clara said firmly. I'm not going to sit here while you risk your life. This is my fight too. Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but we'll need a plan. That evening, under the cover of darkness, Ethan and Clara approached Victor's estate. Ethan had managed to secure a stolen access card, and Clara wore a simple black outfit, her wedding gown now a distant memory. The estate was a fortress, surrounded by high walls and patrolled by armed guards. Ethan led the way, his movements silent and precise. Clara followed closely, her heart pounding with every step. They slipped through a side entrance, the stolen access card granting them entry. Inside, the estate was eerily quiet, the halls dimly lit. Ethan pulled out a small device, a handheld scanner that detected hidden cameras and security systems. This way, he whispered, motioning for Clara to follow. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, avoiding guards and bypassing locked doors. Finally, they reached a large, reinforced door at the end of a hallway. Ethan knelt down, pulling out a small toolkit. This is it, he said, his voice low. If there's a lab, it's behind this door. Clara watched as he worked quickly, disabling the electronic lock. The door clicked open, and Ethan pushed it ajar, revealing a sterile, high-tech laboratory. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The room was filled with rows of equipment, microscopes, centrifuges, and computers displaying complex chemical formulas. In the center of the lab was a glass chamber, its interior glowing with an ominous blue light. "What is that?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped closer, his expression grim. "It's a containment unit. Whatever they're working on, it's in there." Clara moved to one of the computers, her hands shaking as she began typing. "I'll download everything I can. If we can get this data to the authorities, they'll have no choice but to act." Ethan nodded, keeping watch as Clara worked. But just as the download neared completion, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. "Someone's coming," Ethan said sharply. "We need to move." Clara grabbed the USB drive, her heart racing. Ethan led her to a side door, and they slipped out just as the lab's main door swung open. They moved quickly, retracing their steps through the estate, but as they neared the exit, an alarm blared, the sound piercing through the night. "They know we're here," Ethan said, his voice tense. "Run." Clara didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted after Ethan, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind them, the sound of shouting and heavy boots grew louder. Ethan led her to hidden passage, a narrow tunnel that opened into the woods surrounding the estate. They ran until the shouts faded into the distance, the cold night air biting at their skin. Finally, they stopped, both of them gasping for breath. Clara clutched the USB drive tightly, her hands trembling. "We did it," she said, her voice shaky but triumphant. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "This is just the beginning. Victor won't let this go. He'll come after us with everything he has." Clara met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll be ready." The grand ballroom of the Harrington International Hotel was a spectacle of wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room, where the city's elite mingled in designer suits and glittering gowns. At the center of it all stood Victor Harrington, his sharp smile and commanding presence drawing the attention of everyone around him. Tonight was supposed to be his moment of triumph. The press conference he had organized was a carefully orchestrated event to announce a groundbreaking medical innovation developed in partnership with Dr. Angela Lin. But Victor's confidence masked a darker truth. This was also the night he planned to solidify his control over the Ravenwood fortune and expand his empire of corruption. And what he didn't know was that his carefully laid plans were about to unravel. In a small, dimly lit room just a few floors above the ballroom, Ethan Cross and Clara Ravenwood prepared for the final phase of their mission. Clara sat at a desk, her laptop open as she reviewed the files they had stolen from Victor's lab. The USB drive had revealed everything, detailed plans for the bioweapons project, financial records tying Victor to illegal activities, and even evidence implicating Angela Lynn in human experimentation. "This is it," Clara said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "This is the proof we need to expose him." Ethan nodded, his expression calm but focused. He adjusted the small earpiece in his ear, his other hand resting on the tablet that controlled their equipment. "The press conference starts in 10 minutes. Are you ready?" Clara met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "I've never been more ready." Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Stick to the plan and we'll get through this." Down in the ballroom, Victor stepped onto the stage, his smile widening as the crowd fell silent. Cameras flashed and reporters leaned forward, their pens poised to capture his every word. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice smooth and confident, "tonight marks a new era in medical innovation. Thanks to our partnership with Dr. Angela Lynn, we have developed a revolutionary treatment that will save millions of lives." The crowd erupted into applause, but before Victor could continue, the large screen behind him flickered. The applause died down as the screen went black, then lit up again, this time displaying a series of documents and images. Gasps filled the room as the audience read the damning evidence. Financial records, emails, and photos of the lab experiments. The final image was a blueprint of the bioweapons project, labeled with Victor's and Angela's signatures. Victor's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing as he turned to the screen. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. From the back of the room, Clara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "It's the truth, Victor. The truth about you, your so-called innovation, and the lives you've destroyed to get here." All eyes turned to her as she walked toward the stage, her posture confident despite the pounding of her heart. Victor's expression darkened. "Clara, I see you've decided to make a spectacle of yourself, but this little stunt won't work. No one will believe you." "They don't have to take my word for it," Clara shot back. She gestured to the screen. "The evidence speaks for itself, and it's already been sent to the authorities." Victor's jaw tightened, his mask of composure slipping. "You think you can ruin me? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Before Clara could respond, the ballroom doors burst open, and a team of federal agents stormed in, their badges gleaming under the chandeliers. "Victor Harrington, you're under arrest," one of the agents announced, his voice firm. The room erupted into chaos as Victor's associates scrambled to distance themselves from him. Angela Lynn, who had been standing near the stage, tried to slip away, but Ethan appeared at her side, blocking her path. "Going somewhere, Dr. Lynn?" he asked, his tone cold. Angela glared at him but said nothing as the agents moved in to detain her. Victor, meanwhile, was dragged off the stage, his protests falling on deaf ears. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. "You'll regret this, Clara." Clara watched as he was led away, her hands trembling slightly. She felt Ethan's presence beside her, his steady gaze grounding her. "It's over," he said quietly. Clara nodded, a wave of relief washing over her. "We did it." Later that night, as the ballroom emptied and the chaos subsided, Clara and Ethan stood on the hotel's rooftop, the city lights stretching out before them. "You were incredible down there," Ethan said, his voice soft. Clara smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "What happens now? Victor's gone, but rebuilding your family's company won't be easy." Clara took a deep breath, her resolve firm. "I'll do whatever it takes. My mother's legacy deserves to be protected, and I'll make sure the company stands for something good, something she would have been proud of." Ethan nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "You're stronger than you realize, Clara." She looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "And you're not as cold as you pretend to be, Ethan Cross." For the first time in what felt like forever, Clara allowed herself to smile, a real, genuine smile. A year had passed since the night Victor Harrington's empire crumbled. The world had moved on, but for Clara Ravenwood, life had taken on a new meaning. The Ravenwood estate, once a symbol of control and obligation, now stood as a beacon of hope and renewal. The gardens, which had been meticulously maintained for appearances, were now alive with vibrant wildflowers and laughter. Today the estate wasn't hosting a forced wedding. It was celebrating a union built on trust, love, and shared purpose. Clara stood in front of a mirror in her childhood bedroom, but this time there was no sadness in her eyes. Her wedding dress was simple yet elegant, a reflection of her own transformation. The lace sleeves hugged her arms, and the soft fabric flowed gracefully to the floor. Her hair was loosely pinned, with a few strands framing her glowing face. "Are you ready?" a familiar voice asked from the doorway. Clara turned to see Ethan Cross, dressed in a tailored suit that somehow made him look even more confident than usual. His sharp features softened as he smiled at her, his eyes filled with admiration. "I've been ready for this for a long time," Clara replied, her voice steady but full of emotion. Ethan stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "You've come so far, Clara. Your mother would be proud of you." Clara's eyes glistened with tears, but she smiled. "And I'm proud of us. We didn't just survive, we built something better." The ceremony took place in the heart of the garden, under an archway of blooming roses and ivy. Friends, family, and even some of the people Clara and Ethan had helped over the past year gathered to witness the moment. As Clara walked down the aisle, her father, Edward Ravenwood, stood at the front, waiting to give her away. Their relationship had been strained after everything that had happened, but over the past year, Edward had worked to rebuild her trust. He had stepped down from the company, allowing Clara to take the lead and reshape its future. When Clara reached him, Edward's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry for everything, Clara. You've shown me what true strength looks like." Clara smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "Thank you, Dad, for finally letting me be who I am." She turned to Ethan, who was waiting for her at the altar. His expression was calm, but the way he looked at her spoke volumes. The officiant began the ceremony, but for Clara and Ethan, the words were a blur. All they could focus on was each other, their shared journey, the battles they had fought, and the future they were about to build together. When the moment came to exchange vows, Clara's voice was steady, her words heartfelt. "Ethan, you came into my life when I felt trapped and powerless. You showed me that I could fight for myself, for my family, and for what's right. I promise to stand by your side, no matter what challenges come our way." Ethan's voice was equally steady, though his eyes betrayed the depth of his emotions. "Clara, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You've taught me that strength isn't just about power. It's about compassion, resilience, and hope. I promise to protect you, to support you, and to love you for the rest of my life." As they exchanged rings, the crowd erupted into applause, and when they kissed, it felt like the culmination of everything they had fought for. The reception was a lively celebration, filled with laughter, music, and heartfelt toasts. Clara and Ethan danced under the stars, the soft glow of fairy lights illuminating the garden. At one point, Clara stepped away to look out over the estate. Ethan joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice low. Clara smiled, leaning into him. "About how far we've come. A year ago, I felt like my life was over. Now I feel like it's just beginning." Ethan kissed her temple, his voice filled with quiet pride. "That's because you refused to give up. You fought for your freedom, for your family, and for justice, and now you're building something incredible." Clara turned to face him, her eyes shining. "We're building it together." Ethan smiled, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Together." As the music swelled in the background and their guests cheered, Clara and Ethan shared another kiss, their future stretching out before them like the stars above. As the night drew to a close, the camera panned over the Ravenwood estate, now glowing with life and joy. The laughter of guests echoed softly in the background, blending with the gentle rustle of the garden's flowers in the evening breeze. Clara and Ethan stood at the edge of the garden, their hands intertwined as they looked out over the horizon. The journey that had brought them here had been anything but easy. It had been filled with danger, heartbreak, and moments of doubt. But through it all, they had found strength, not just in themselves, but in each other. Clara turned to Ethan, her voice soft but resolute. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what we did. We have the power to make a difference, and we're going to use it." Ethan nodded, his expression serious but filled with pride. "Together, we'll make sure the world knows that justice and integrity still matter, that no one is above the truth." The camera lingered on their faces for a moment before fading to black, replaced by a simple message. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to face it. Justice is not given, it is fought for. And love is the strength that carries us through it all. The video then transitioned to Clara's voice, addressing the audience directly. "Thank you for joining us on this journey. This story isn't just about fighting corruption or finding love. It's about the power of standing up for what's right, even when the odds are against you." If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. And don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Remember, no matter how dark things may seem, there's always a way forward. You just have to be brave enough to take the first step. The screen faded to the final shot. Clara and Ethan walking hand in hand through the garden, their silhouettes framed by the soft glow of the moonlight. Thank you for watching this story on Emma's Stories. If you enjoyed this journey of courage, love, and justice, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales like this one. At Emma's Stories, we believe that every story has the power to inspire, to move, and to remind us of the strength we all carry within. So, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. And we'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Clara and Ethan's journey? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one of them. Thank you for being a part of our community. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and remember, every great story starts with a spark of courage.